Hello, welcome back to another pen talk. Today is going to be a single subject, but a number of pens and a number of nibs, which will be the focus. It's a series of Esterbrook's that I put together, inked up, with various nibs in them. So I thought we'd do a review of how these nibs write. One of the unique characteristics of Esterbrook's was they all had a replaceable renew nib, which unscrewed, and it was very easy to replace the nib. And they made 33 styles of nibs, all that fit all of the different style of fountain pens that they made, which was just unique. There was no one else in the business that did that. You could also go to your local retailer and get a new nib, get a replacement nib. If you had a fine nib and you wanted a medium or a broad or a stub, you could get that. If you wanted an accounting nib, a student nib. And the other thing that's interesting about Esterbrook's is other people made nibs that fit into them. It's a nice calligraphy nib that will work. So these are the pens that I have inked up, ready to go. I'll put a list in the description of the video. So hopefully this will give you a little view of Esterbrook's, their nibs, and why I like them and appreciate them and continue to enjoy the many varieties of Esterbrook's that were made and the interesting nibs that went with them. Let's take a look at some ads from the early 50s. Esterbrook really promoted their 33 different points and the fact that you selected the point that you wanted. You know, and they really focused on the pen as a writing instrument and how important the nib was to ensure that the experience that you got was what you wanted and what you expected. And of course they give you a few choices in colors and shapes of the pen, but the important point is the point. And there, as again, they promote the 33 different ones. And this was from a Canadian magazine. I found a nice seller on eBay that had these for sale, and I picked them up for a few bucks, which I really enjoy. Here's how they did a holiday promotion. We'll try to look a little bit closer into this as they describe the different points. And the red holiday theme. So again, they were consistent in how they promoted their choice that they gave their customers as to what nib would be appropriate. And here they show the different pens. The metal top one is a little bit rarer than some of the other ones. And of course, they're known for their desk sets and their pen and pencil sets. Another quick drive-by of another ad that promoted their points. Each of the ads seemed to have a different set of points that they were promoting, which was interesting. But again, there's 33 of them. That's what they certainly made certain that their customers were aware of. Some of these we'll take a look at more closely in the writing sample of these pens. Before we dive into the writing samples, I thought I'd give a good illustration of the Renew nib that Esterbrook came out with. So this is your classic red J. Open it up, you'll see, you know, a normal type of Esterbrook nib. This is a 9668. This is an Osmeroid. It was an an English company that did a lot of calligraphy type nibs. This is an interesting pen because it is a piston fill. But what makes it more interesting is this nib is screwed in. It's interesting, long, not as flexible as you'd think from looking at it, but I haven't had a chance to really experiment with writing with it. It unscrews, and lo and behold, it'll go right into the Esterbrook body, the Esterbrook section. I mean, that is definitely something that's unique to Esterbrook, and Esterbrook did do a lot of stuff in England. So it's not unusual to find that they had this commonality. First set of Esterbrook's that we're going to start with are the fine and extra fine nibs. The first pen is a late 1950s model Esterbrook. It doesn't look like the classic ones that you've seen. Unscrew cap, but what makes this interesting is it has an Aerometric filling system similar to what you would find in Parker 45. A lot of ink it holds. So it was something that Esterbrook came into late in their fountain pen manufacturing. This nib is a 2550, which Esterbrook defines as extra fine bookkeeping type nib. The ink in here is Noodler's Bulletproof Black. I did a little bit of smoothing on this nib. It was a little bit scratchy when I first tried writing with it, but it's a pretty fine line. It is now pretty smooth. It glides across the paper. The ink flow is good. It will pick up paper. It is a pretty sharp nib, so that's one thing you need to be careful about. Next one, here's a red J with a 9556. So the 2000 series was defined as not having tipping material, and those nibs cost, say, a quarter a piece, and the 9000 series had tipping material, and they cost more money. I think it was like 65 cents or 75 cents. You can see there is some tipping material there. I'm not really impressed with the tipping material, if that's how it was presented and advertised. But the 9556 is called fine writing. And I think Esterbrook delineated their 9000 series as more as a writer's nib. Again, this is very smooth, and I'd say the line is as fine, if not finer, than the 2550. I didn't have to do anything to get this nib to write the way that it is. This was after I got the pen. I'm pretty certain this was an eBay buy. So again, a very fine nib, and those of you into fine nibs might find this an interesting pen to write with. The third in a series of fine nibs is another 2000 series, and this is the 2556 nib. I love this nib. I'd say of all the Esterbrook nibs, this is the one I enjoy writing with the most. Didn't have to do much to get this pen to write well. I don't think I did anything to smooth the nib. So this is a 2556, and this is absolutely as smooth as any nib that I've ever used. Consistent line writing. I use this pen daily. This is my bulletproof black for legal type of work, where I want to make certain that the signature stays forever. But again, this is a great nib. I think I've talked with other Esterbrook owners, and 2556 is a very common and it's a popular nib. Not quite as fine as the other two, but just a joy to write with. Now we're going to look at a purse pen. And this has a 1551 nib. The 1000 series definitely has not even a rollover on the end of the nib. It's really just a nice flat piece of stainless steel that's curved into a nib. But as you can see, it does have an interesting shape at the end of the nib. And I also very much enjoy the way this pen writes. It's almost as smooth. In fact, it is as smooth as the 2556. Nice ink, the iroshizuku Ameiru. Works well with this pen, I think. It's a little bit of a broader line. even though this is considered a medium, so that would make sense. And again, it's considered a student writer. That's the way they defined it. Apologize about my writing over the camera. It's a challenge. But again, an incredibly nice writer. I would put this up against any modern pen that I write with. We're going to make another movement into two other medium pens, nibs, that are a little bit different in their design. So the copper one here is a 9000 series. It's one of the more interesting 9000 ones. It's a 9314M for medium, and it's in a relief nib. If you look at the tip, you can see it's kind of like a left oblique. It's an interesting style. This is, you know, a little bit sharper than most people would like. It does have a very good sweet spot, and when you stay in it, it does well. But as you can see, if you vary out of it, you're going to get some skipping. It is smooth when you're on the sweet spot. There's not as much line variation as what you would expect with the way the nib is angled, but it is a medium, so that's about what you would expect. Just a nib that's probably a little bit more difficult to find if you're looking for a nib like that. So the blue SJ has another interesting nib. So this is a 2314B relief. So we've had the 9000 series, we're going back to the 2000 series, and very interesting nib on this one. Very similar shape. The relief nibs all had a similar kind of oblique stub to them, italic you might say. But this being a broad nib, this is as smooth as any of the other ones. It doesn't have as sensitive a sweet spot as the 9314. Just enjoyable to write with, and you can get a really wet line out of this nib. Something you may not have expected from an Esterbrook, but this one does really a good job with that. This is a Noodlers ink called Legal Lapis, so this may become an interesting pen for a signature, but at the time being, it's just something that I enjoy having a variety of. I have all the 2314 series, fine, medium, and broad, and in the 9314, I just have the fine and medium. As we continue on in the broad category, we're going to look at two other ones from the 9000 and 2000 series. So we're going to look at the gray one first. So this is a 2968 nib. And again, a little interesting design, the way the Esterbrook and the numbering is done on it, a little bit different. Esterbrook did vary that over time. So this again is considered a broad nib, but it doesn't look as broad as the 2314. We're going to flip our Clairefontaine 90-gram pad around, get it lined up a little bit. So this is a 2968, and as you can see, it's definitely not as broad as the 2314 broad was, but this is considered to be a firm broad. It's not as smooth. You get a decent amount of feedback from this nib, something I can't tell by just looking at it until you put pen to paper. This is one of the Rohrer-Klinger Iron-gall inks, Scabiosa, so it has interesting kind of purplish color to it. So that's the 2968, which is again considered a firm broad in Esterbrook's terminology. So the other one I wanted to look at is and we get it to focus, a 9968. Again, similar the way they've put the labeling on the nib. And the 9000 series is considered more of a writer's nib. And as you can see, this is definitely much broader than the 2968. So both of them had the same last three digits, one with a 2000 series, one with a 9000 series. And this is considered for broad script. Again, this has similar type of feedback as the 2968, certainly not as smooth as some of the other nibs that we've written with, but still an enjoyable nib. You know this is a stiff steel nib. There's no give to this whatsoever, and you really don't get much line variation out of it. This is a Apache Sunset, which I thought might work well in this nib, and I do like the color in this nib. So we've saved what might be called the best for last, or the Grail nib of Esterbrook's. So it's in this green Model J. If we open it up and get the camera to focus. Yes, this is a 9128. This is considered Esterbrook's Flex nib. They made a few of them called Flex nibs. This is the one that's the most popular one. The feed really covers the whole part of the nib, and as you can see, it's slightly off center. This nib is a little bit loose in the feed. I haven't taken any of these apart to try to work on them. It does write fine. So we're talking about a 9128, which is considered an extra fine flexible. And it is a fine nib, as fine as any of the other ones that we've used. And as you can see, you can get some generous line variation out of it. It's fairly smooth. It's less feedback than the 968 models. This is a nice Herbin Vert Empire. I like the green ink with the green pen. And you can drag the feed on the paper. That is one of the challenges I've had with this pen, so you need to keep it, if you're going to flex it, you need to keep it pretty vertical. And it does do a nice job. So that's kind of the overview of a few of the nibs. Esterbrook made 33 of them. In the beginning, we saw some of the ads that they put out there. So this was their forte, and this is what they did and tried to establish themselves in the marketplace, and they were successful for a number of years until eventually the ballpoints and the economic challenges took over, and they finally stopped making pens in late 60s, early 70s. Here's some close-ups of the writing that we did with the Esterbrook nibs. Hopefully these will give you a little bit better appreciation for the ink that nibs lay down. Of course, here's my favorite one, the 2556. My next favorite one, the 1551, which I would not have guessed based on it's a 1000 series, and it doesn't have enough going for it. And then two that are quite unique and good. They're two relief nibs. Of course, now we got some of the broad nibs, and the 2968 certainly is not as broad as one would expect based on the description. The 9968 is pretty broad, and does look nice with the Apache Sunset ink. And then we go down to the Holy Grail one, the 9128 flexible extra fine. Really nicely done. Hope you appreciate it. So hopefully you've enjoyed this little view of some interesting Esterbrook nibs. Maybe you can start expanding your pen experience, if you hadn't already, getting into Esterbrook's and trying them out. So I hope you have many wonderful pen experiences. The more you have, the more fun I think you can have. So until later, bye.